thank you for joining us. My name is Rachel Murray. I am an adult services librarian here at the Warren-Newport Public Library, and I am going to be leading you tonight through our Introduction to Excel class. We will be going over some of the basics of how you use Excel, how to input data, and how to manipulate some of that data. Just a few quick thank yous. I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library. Our Warren-Newport Friends of the Library group is a wonderful organization that pays for all of our programming, so we really do appreciate their support. If you did not get handouts for this class, some of you may have, some of you may not, you can definitely reach out to the library. We'll be more than happy to send those handouts to you. You can email us at askus@wnpl.info. And we'll be happy to get that information out to you. Also, we do have a follow-up to this class that is Excel formulas. If you are interested in signing up for that, please check our website, www.wnpl.info. All righty, let's go ahead and get started. I am going to share my screen with you. And the library currently uses Excel 2013. If you have an earlier version or a later version, that's okay. You can absolutely still utilize that for the class that we're doing this evening. All versions of Excel from the 2007 version through the Office 365 version are very, very similar. They all run on the ribbons and tabs system, and they really are very, very similar products. So if you have those versions, by all means, you can still utilize this class. Alrighty, so I've got my spreadsheet open here. In Excel, when we talk about a spreadsheet, we are talking about the gridded sheet that you're seeing here on the screen right now. Now, if you are talking about a file that you save in Excel, that is actually called a workbook. A set of worksheets get saved together in a workbook. So when you hear somebody talking about a workbook in Excel, that's what they mean. It's just another name for a file. And as you can see from my screen here, I have nothing on this page. If I look at the bottom of my screen though, I can see that I actually have several sheets available on this workbook. So a workbook can actually have quite a few sheets in it. So you can keep sets of work together. You can keep things like budgets together and then label them according to what year they are or what month they are. And you can also always change the name on a tab on the bottom of your screen just by double clicking on it. Type in the new name and it will save that sheet under the new title. So that's what a workbook is. When we first get into Excel, you have the option to start with a blank workbook, which would look like what we have on our screen here. You also always have the option to open up a file. You can go to the File tab, you can open up a file, you can take a file that you're already working on and save it under a new name, which is actually a really good idea. If you're somebody that's very new to using Excel and somebody hands you a spreadsheet that they want updated and you don't want to damage that spreadsheet or mess it up, save a copy of it under a new name. Just do save as, call it whatever the name is, copy, and play around with that until you're a little bit more comfortable with what they're asking you to do. So those are just some quick suggestions when you're first getting started. I'm going to go ahead and go back to our screen here, and I'm going to give you a tour of what we're seeing on the screen when we open up Excel. Now, again, I'm using the 2013 version of Excel, and all of the 2007 through the Office 365 versions of Excel use the same tools. If you look along the top of the screen here, we can see that there are some tabs. It says File, Home, Insert, Page Layout, and so on. They call this system in Microsoft the ribbons and tabs system. Each tab is connected to a ribbon of commands. So every time you click a different tab, you're going to have a different selection of options, a different selection of tools that you can use. So when somebody talks about the Home tab or the Page Layout tab, that's what they mean. The ribbon is going to be the collection of commands that are attached to that tab. Just above the ribbon and tab here, we have a couple of little things that are nice little shortcuts. First is this little one right here. It looks like an old floppy disk. That's the Save button. As you're working, it's a nice quick way to just click and save. Most of the Microsoft products do have an auto save feature now, but it's a nice idea to save every so often just in case. You never know what's going to happen. Next to that, we actually have two arrows. They're grayed out right now. One is gray and is swooping off to the left. The other one is grayed out and is swooping off to the right. These are your undo and redo buttons. These are super, super important. The reason being that your buttons are going to allow you to undo something that you did or redo something that you did. I'll give you an example. If I click in a cell here and I just type hello, I have now entered something into my spreadsheet. If I look at the top now, my undo button is now an option for me. If I click undo, it undoes the last thing that I did. So if you're entering information into a spreadsheet and suddenly you don't recognize the information, it doesn't look like it's formatted properly, it doesn't look like it's working properly, you can click that undo button and it gets rid of it and you can start over. Now, once we undo something, then we have the option to redo it. So now the redo button is an option for us too. So you can undo and redo until the spreadsheet looks like how you want it to look. All right, I'm going to take a few minutes now and just introduce you to some of the common tools that you're going to find on the Home tab. For the most part tonight, this will be the tab that we're working with the most often. On the Home tab, we have things that you'll see frequently in other Microsoft products. So we have things like the paste, copy and paste. So if you wanted to copy something from your spreadsheet and put it into another sheet or on another place on the page, you would utilize copy. And then you could click paste once you find the new place for it. Now you'll notice as I'm hovering with my mouse over each of these commands, I'm also getting what the keystroke is. So if you're somebody that really likes to keep your hands on the keyboard, you can learn what the keystrokes are in Excel and not have to lift your hands up off the keyboard. So if you wanted to copy something, it's Control-C. Paste is Control-V. So if you really like to keep your hands on that keyboard for speed, you can easily utilize those keystrokes. And anytime you hover over something in Excel, it's going to tell you what the keystroke is for that. Now, next to the copy and paste, we actually have the font section. Now, the spreadsheet that we're looking at here has already been auto-formatted or auto-fit to accept Calibri 11-point font. That means all of the cells on our spreadsheet are just tall enough to fit that font and have it fit nicely. If we were to change the size of our font, we would actually, change the size of our cells. But it's always going to be auto fit already for that font size. And that's a standard Microsoft font right now. So if you're working in Excel, that's usually what people expect you to be working in. You can, however, to offset data, to make it look different, you can always choose a different font and have that in your spreadsheet. Now below the font size, we have bold, which is going to make text bold. We have italicize and underline. Just next to that, we have a tool that is unique to Excel, and this is our grid line tool. If we were to print this spreadsheet right now, it would actually print out as a blank sheet of paper. All of the grid lines that we're seeing on the screen are actually just there for our own visual organization. So if we wanted to have grid lines actually appear, we would have to use this tool here. And this allows us to choose what types of borders and what types of grid lines we want to see on our page. And you can choose all borders, which is going to have every single cell outlined, or you can have just a top border or a bottom border and so on. So when we get to that point, I'm going to show you how that works. We'll actually put some grid lines around some of our data, but that is where we will find that tool. Right next to the grid line, we actually have the fill color. This would allow you to change the color of a cell or the color of a column or a row to offset it again so that it stands out, it's easier to find. Next to that, we have our font color. So again, if you want to change your font color to have it stand out, this would be what you would choose, and there's lots of different colors to choose from. We're not going to worry too much about alignment tonight, but you can change the alignment of data in a cell. If you have a larger cell and you want the data to be aligned to the top or the center or the bottom, the default is always going to be the bottom. You can also choose to have data left justified, center justified, or right justified. Now, this section right here is another one that you might need to use. Wrap text is going to allow you to keep a group of text together in a single cell. What you'll notice is we start entering data. I'm going to show you a spreadsheet that has some data already entered into it. is that the text starts disappearing under other columns. So in order to avoid that, you can actually choose to wrap the text and it will keep it all together in a single cell. The next area right here is the format section. This is for formatting numbers. And it allows us to say that a specific number or a specific group of numbers are a very particular type of data. Right now it's set to general numbers, so we can actually set things to a currency value. We can even choose the currency. We can set things to be a percentage. We can decide if we want commas or not. And we can even choose how many decimal places something should have. If you have a default set for your spreadsheet that it should be to 2 decimal places, which most spreadsheets are, you might want to change that if you're working with other layers of numbers, or that you want to round from 1/100ths or thousandths of a dollar to be able to round up. But you can do that from right here. You can either increase the decimal place or reduce the decimal place. Next to that, we're not going to deal a whole lot tonight with conditional formatting, but what conditional formatting does is it allows you to say that a particular cell is a specific kind of data. Again, so it's easier to find. So if you enter a calculation, you could use this tool right here. It's going to gray out that cell and have everything appear in orange. It's going to say that this is a calculation. So it's a faster way to find your result. You can have all of your formulas in different colors. So it really is kind of a neat tool when you get further along in Excel. Next to that is how to format as a table. I will show you how to take the data that we're working with and format it as a table. Tables are extremely useful because they allow you to very quickly sort data. Now, next to that, we have our insert button right here. This is going to allow you to add cells, add rows, or add columns to a sheet. We've got delete, which again is going to let you remove cells, columns, or rows. And we have the format button. Format is going to allow you to set the row height or the column width, and it's a nice quick shortcut to do that. And finally, we have some other shortcuts here. There's lots of preset formulas in Excel. A preset formula in Excel is actually called a function, but they're all little shortcuts right here to get to some of the functions. You can also click more functions, and that brings up a pop-up menu that will allow you to search for a formula or a function. That's nice because if you don't know what the actual command is to do a formula or a function, this will let you search for it by topic. And most of your formulas are going to be found under the Formulas tab. And next to that, we actually have sort and filter. If you have a lot of data entries and you want to be able to look for only a certain group of data, sort and filter is very easy to use. You can also do find and select. If you're looking for a specific number, you can click find, and it's going to let you look through it and find just that particular number. All right, so that's what's on our home tab. Now I want to describe to you what we're seeing on our spreadsheet. Directly below the ribbon, no matter which ribbon you're looking at, you're going to have your cell name box. That is this cell right here. And the cell name is always going to be the intersection of the column and the row. So right now, the active cell is cell A1. If I click someplace else on my page, now I'm in cell C6, my cell name box reflects that for me. Now, this will be important when you have a ton of data on a sheet and a lot of formatting. It can be really hard to tell, wait, where am I on my spreadsheet? What's my active cell? This will always tell you what your active cell is. The active cell is going to be the cell that when you enter something into it, it's going to go in that cell. Right next to this name box, we have the formula bar. The formula bar lets you do two things. It shows you both the data that you enter on the page, and it lets you edit the data up here very easily. It also will show you the formula that is used or the function that is used after you make a calculation. So when you have a result appearing on the screen here, you can click on it, but the formula that you used will still appear up in the formula bar. So you're always, when you're working with formulas, you will rely heavily on this bar. Now below that, we actually have our real spreadsheet. You'll see that each column begins with a letter and columns begin to repeat. So you'll start seeing AA, AB, AC, and so on. You'll get to AAA, AAB, the further on down you go to the right on your screen. All of the rows are numbered, and there's roughly a little over 10,000 rows on a single sheet. So you really can enter quite a bit of data just using one single spreadsheet. When we're clicking, again, each cell, you can see our cell name right here, but when we're entering data, we're using our mouse to click on different cells. That's how we're going to find the cell to enter the data in. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard. Just to the left of your number pad on your keyboard, there's 4 directional arrows. Those allow you to go up, down, left, or right. And you can also use your tab key. You can do tab or shift tab. Tab's going to move you over to the right. Shift tab's going to move you back to the left. And if you want to select an entire column or an entire row, to do that, you would click on the letter at the top of the column. You can select several columns actually that way. You would hold down your mouse button and drag across and pick a whole bunch of columns. Now, any change that you make to the spreadsheet is going to affect all of that area that you selected. You can also do the same thing with rows. You can click on a row and drag it down and select several rows. Again, any changes that you make are going to affect those rows. And just so you know, if you ever need to change everything on your sheet or you want to format everything on your sheet, you can always use the little triangle button that's up here in the corner. It's right there. I'm going to click on it. When I do, it actually selects the entire spreadsheet. So if you use that triangle in the corner, it's going to select everything. So now whatever you do will affect the entire page. That's nice if you want to change fonts or something like that. Alrighty, so that's our tour. Oh, I did want to show you one other thing. Again, if you want to add sheets to your spreadsheet, that is here at the bottom. You're going to click the plus sign and it will let you add new sheets. And you can actually add quite a few sheets to a single workbook. They're going to shrink the tabs the more you add, but you can add several dozen to a single workbook. And that way allows you to save several different types of files together. Okay. So now I've been showing you our blank sheet here. I'm actually going to show you now a sheet that I have some data on. Now this data, as you can see, kind of hard to read. It's really kind of overlapping in different columns and rows. And I'm going to show you how we're going to format this. And when we're done, it's going to look more like this. So this is our formatted budget sheet. We're starting from this and we're going to get to a nice, well-organized budget sheet. So the first thing we want to do is we actually should really be able to see our data. That's one of the most important things, is you want to be able to view what you're entering into your spreadsheet. So we need to start out by formatting the columns and rows so that we can most easily see our data. Now, as I said earlier, when you're ready to affect a change to an entire column, you're going to click on the letter at the top of the column. Now, there's 2 ways that we can change the width of a column to make our data more visible. I'm going to show you the first way first, and that uses the format button on our home tab and home ribbon. I'm going to click the drop-down arrow, and the 4th option down is Autofit column width. Autofit column width will make your column just as wide as it needs to be for the longest term in it. So if I choose Autofit column width, I can now see everything that was in column A. And it looks like my longest term in there was insurance payment. So it lets me see that entire word. Now, the other way that you can change your column width would be, again, to click on the letter. I'm going to choose column B this time. And you're going to put your cursor in between the 2 columns. Now, it should be on the right side of the column that you want to make bigger. If I put it on the left side, it's going to actually change column A. I actually want to change column B. So I have my cursor on the right side in between B and C. So I hold down my mouse button, and when I drag to the side, it automatically makes that column bigger. Now, it doesn't have any formula. It hasn't auto-fitted at all, but it actually just makes it as wide as I'd like it to be. The next column where we had data entered is this projected increase. You can see that's really not fitting in column C. So again, manually, I'm just going to drag it out like that. Now, if at any point you are looking at your spreadsheet and you're looking at data and you notice something that looks like this, you see that there's something supposed to be in there, obviously, but it all looks like number symbols or hashtags. that actually means that the column is too narrow to accurately reflect the number. Excel does this so that you don't accidentally think that 100 million is 100 because it's being cut off by the column. So if Excel cannot fully display the number for you, it's going to turn it into that number symbol like that. So anytime you see that, it's not an error. It just means that you need to make your column bigger so that the information can fit in there. Okay, so it's starting to look a little bit nicer. Now, what else can we do to change our spreadsheet here? I'm actually going to select row 1 now, and we're going to use some of our formatting options up here at the top. So I've selected row 1, so now whatever I do is going to affect all of row 1. And I'm going to bold that data that's in there. I'm actually going to, let's see, I want to change the color. So I choose the fill, and again, it affects the entire row because I selected the row. And then I actually want to change the font color. So if I change the font color to like a dark blue, now that first row is a little bit offset. It's a little bit more obvious. I can also, using my cursor here, I can click between the 1 and the 2, the bottom of the row that you want to change the size of. I can drag it down and it's going to make row 1 a little bit thicker. So I can actually see my data a little bit more clearly. It lets me see my headings more clearly. And then if I wanted to change the fill color for my total row, I can do that too. Now, as I said earlier, if we were to print this, it would come out right now, it would have the data that we have on it, but it wouldn't have any grid lines on it. So if I want grid lines to appear on my spreadsheet, I'm actually going to select the area where I want grid lines. In this case, I'm going to choose the columns A, B, and C. I go up to my border tool, click the drop-down arrow, and I'm actually going to say that I want all borders. So it's going to outline every single cell for me. As soon as I select that, I immediately have a border around every single cell in columns A, B, and C. So if I continue to add data, I will have those borders around my data. It'll be nice and easy to read when I print it. Let's say I wanted row 1 to have a slightly different border. I could actually go back and say, nope, I want this one to have a double border. So now it has a double border under it. I could do the same thing for my total row. I could go back and say that I'd like that to have a thick top and bottom border. And it just kind of changes the data as you go along. It changes what you're seeing on your screen. So that's how you would go and change just the basic formatting of what you're seeing on your screen. Again, you change your fill color, your font color, you can change your tool, your border tool right here so that you've got any border lines that you feel are going to make your data more readable. Well, that looks pretty good, but we know that we're talking about monthly costs. We can tell that this is a budget, and this second column here, column B, talks about a monthly cost. If I wanted to reflect this as a dollar value and make sure that it's formatted as a dollar value, I'm going to use this number tool up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the column because I want everything that I type in there to be formatted as a dollar value. So now that I've selected column B, I can go up to the home ribbon and I can go to where the number tool is, and I'm just going to click the dollar sign. As soon as I click that, it immediately gives me a dollar sign in each cell, which indicates that it's money, gives me decimal places out to the hundredths, and it gives me commas when I'm getting into the thousands. So right away, that looks a whole lot cleaner. It's a whole lot easier to read, and it just makes the data a lot more understandable. So that's using our number setting. As I said before, you can actually change the type of number that you're working with. If we were working with dates, we could change the formatting of that. If we wanted to work with fractions or percentages, same thing. We could format all of the numbers to appear a very specific way. All right, it looks pretty good so far. So now we're going to actually start manipulating the data that's on our screen. We've got our monthly costs here, and I've already given us a total line. So how do we get the total to appear here on our spreadsheet? First of all, we really don't want to just add these numbers. I don't want to sit down and add 250 plus 300 plus 350 and so on. The reason is that we want to be able to update our spreadsheet very quickly without always having to go back and change all of our totals. So I'm going to show you how to add this column and show you what Excel does to make sure that your data is easily updatable. So I'm going to start by selecting the data that I want to add. Once I select that, there's two ways that I can start adding this. I can actually click the Autosum button that's up here in the home ribbon, or there's a little box that appears right next to the data that I selected, and I can select that, go to totals, and it gives me some formulas that appear here. I'm going to show you how to use the home ribbon. So I'm going to click on Autosum up here. It'll give me the same result either way. So I click Autosum, and my total appears in the next available cell below the data that I selected. So right here, I can see that my total is $5,400. Added up all of that information. I've clicked on cell B8 because that's where my total is. What I want you to look at now, though, is what is up in the formula bar. This says 5,400, but our formula bar has an actual formula in it, and that has equals sum, parentheses, B2 colon B7 and parentheses. What this means is, first of all, every formula or function in Excel will always begin with an equal sign. That's like the go command for Excel, that, hey, what we're doing here is going to be a formula. Equal sign, and then sum is the word command to add in Excel. That's why it says Autosum up here on our home ribbon. But sum is going to be the command that needs to be in there to say add this information. Then in the parentheses, we have B2 through B7. Now, the reason why it says B2 through B7 is we added cells B2, B3, B4, B5, B6, and B7. So B2 colon B7 is cells B2 through B7. And it's using the cell name, the cell reference, because that way, if we need to make changes, we don't have to keep going back and changing our totals. So let's say we've done our budget for this year. And right after we do our budget, we realize, oh, I think I need to buy a new car. So instead of having a $300 car payment, I'm now going to have a $500 car payment. All I have to do is click on the price, type in the new amount, press enter on my keyboard. The number is updated on the spreadsheet, and the total updates right away too. So it was 5,400, now it's 5,600. When you use a cell reference in your formula, it allows you to easily go back and change the data because it's adding whatever number happens to be in cell B2, whatever number happens to be in cell B3, and so on. So using those cell references in a formula is really, really important. Instead of just grabbing a calculator or trying to figure it out in your head, make sure that you're using a formula. It makes your spreadsheet far more useful to you and to anybody else that might use it after you. Well, that was kind of easy. And that's utilizing a preset function, the function list that's over here. What if there's a formula that we want to do that actually doesn't utilize a preset function in Excel? We can actually type in a function or a formula ourselves. So, and that's what I'm going to show you now. We're going to do that in this column here, column C. And I'm going to walk you through how you would hand type a formula and how you can get that formula across the rest of your spreadsheet. So to do that, we're going to start with the cell that we first want to work with. So this is where I want my, my result to appear. It's cell C2. And again, every formula in Excel begins with an equal sign. So to get started, I need to make sure that I'm typing an equal sign. Now I can see the equal sign, the formula is going to appear here while I'm typing it and up here in the formula bar. But after I press enter and say go to Excel, it's only going to appear up in the formula bar. The result will appear in cell C2. So what I want to do is I want to project an increase for 2022. And I'm just going to pick a number. I'm going to say I want to find out, what if everything goes up 5% for 2022? What's that budget going to look like? So to do that, I again start with my equal sign, and then I need to pick the data that I'm working with. In this case, I want to find out what's a 5% increase of this number in cell B2. So that's $250 in cell B2, but I know that that's in B2. So that's what I'm typing, cell B2. Because again, I want the cell reference, not the actual number. Once I've typed in B2, now I need to multiply that by 105%. If I multiply by 105%, I'm getting the original amount plus 5%. You could also do B2 and multiply it by 5% and then add it back into B2. Either of those methods would work. But I've got B2. Now I need to say multiply by a percentage. The multiplication symbol in Excel is not X. X is a variable. So what you're going to be using is the asterisk. The asterisk on your keyboard is going to be Shift 8, and Excel understands that to mean multiply. So now I can type 105 and the percent symbol. I don't have to use a decimal. I can use a decimal, but I can also just use plain text with the percentage symbol, and Excel will understand what I mean. So I've entered my formula. Now I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. As soon as I do, here is my new total. So my new monthly cost next year for my cell phone bill, if everything goes up 5%, is going to be $262.50. Because I multiplied by a dollar value, it gave me a dollar value in column C. So I don't have to go back and redo that. So that was fairly easy. But the best part about Excel is that I don't have to redo that formula for all the rest of these cells. If you take your mouse, and you can see that there's kind of a little box right in the lower right corner of that cell. If I put my cursor there, it turns to a plus symbol. If I double click, it's going to paste that formula across all of the cells below it. So if I go click, click, there it goes. It took the original formula and adapted it for the data that is in the next cell and put that total here. So when I click on cell C3, instead of my formula saying it's equal to B2 times 105%, because I'm now in row 3, now it says it's B3 times 105%. This one's going to be B4 times 105%. So you really only have to perform the calculation once, and then you can actually paste it across. And it's actually super, super easy for you to take that formula and put it in all of the other cells. Now you can also then just do your total again. So you have your total appearing here in cell C8. And super easily, we were able to put all of that data in, perform those calculations, and it probably took us about 5 minutes. Once you get used to it, you can do it in several seconds. But that's really how you input a formula. You're either going to find the shortcut for it, or you're going to go to the Formulas tab and look up the formula for it. There's a lot of formulas in Excel. There's a lot of functions. If you hover over any one of these, it actually tells you what it does and kind of gives you a little bit of instruction into how you would enter that to perform that calculation. Some of these are going to be really complicated. Some of them aren't. But you can also remember from that home tab, you can always go to Autosum and click more functions, and it will let you look for functions that you can input. And you can do that by keyword, which is very nice. Well, so far this looks pretty much like the one we did before. I think I changed the font color on the other one. So if we wanted to change the font color here, we could do that. Looks pretty much the same. So we were able to format that pretty quickly. Now we have a really small data set here, but let's say we had several dozen columns and several hundred rows. It can be really hard to go back and locate a specific budget item, to go back and locate a specific dollar amount. And there are tools in Excel that make this really easy. One of those tools is actually to create a table. Creating a table allows you to sort data in each section by a different option. And I'm going to show you how we can do that. So I'm going to select my original data amount here, just the cells that have the data in it. And then up in my home ribbon, I'm going to go to Format as Table. When I click that drop-down button, I have a whole bunch of different visual formats for my table. These are just colors and layouts. This doesn't change how the table works at all. So you would really just pick one that looks good and that works for what you want it to work for. You select that, and then we get a pop-up box. The pop-up box is saying, please tell me where the data is for your table. Now, if I had not already selected the data section, all I would have to do is click on this little arrow here, select the area that I want for my table, click the arrow again, and it inputs it for my table. You also want to make sure that if you have headings across the top of your columns, that you click this little check mark here where it says my table has headers. These headers are going to be the areas that you can sort by. So when I say okay, now my spreadsheet is now set up in a table format. Now what this means is that I can actually go back and sort by different categories of data. So instead of seeing all of my budget categories, I could go back and sort them A to Z. And when I sort, it's going to move all of the relevant data as well. It's not just going to move things in the first column. It's going to understand that I mean to do everything relative to each other. So I'm going to be moving the car price over to where the car payment list is. So if I were to choose to sort Z to A, it actually puts my total in the top because I did Z to A, but it moves everything and puts it in alphabetical order. I can also see which column I sorted by because there's now a little arrow right next to the drop down arrow. So if I want to get rid of that, I could just go back and do A to Z, and it's going to put it back the way that it was. I can also go back and only see things that are a specific cost. And I'm actually going to get rid of something on here. I'm noticing I did put my total in there, and I really didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to go back and do my table again. And you can always go back and change things in Excel. That's what makes it nice. But I'm going to go back, and I actually want to format this as a table again. So I'm going to use my trusty undo button. As I showed you before, to get rid of something that you've done, each time you hit undo, it takes you back one step. So if I hit undo, it's going to get me that did away with my sort, did away, there we are. I'm back to looking at my table or my spreadsheet without a table in it. So whenever you do something and you realize, you know, that doesn't quite look the way that I wanted it to, use that undo button. Now I'm right back where I was. I can go back and reformat this so that it works the way I want it to. So to do that again, format as table. Click on the format that you want to use. And then this time I'm going to tell it I want to use just my original categories here, not my totals. And then I'm going to say my table does have headers. And I'm going to say okay. So now when I come back and I look at my spreadsheet, if I wanted to sort by cost, I could do smallest to largest, and it puts everything in smallest to largest range. I could say I wanted largest to smallest, and that's going to put my mortgage payment at the top and then everything in descending order. I could also come back and say that I only wanted to see certain categories of data. Again, I'm going to click on the drop down arrow next to my budget categories. If I unclick select all and I choose just things like car payment, and I only want to see my cell phone bill, just things that I consider to be a lower payment, an insurance payment, now I'm going to say okay. Now, it hasn't deleted that data. I can tell that it hasn't deleted it a couple of ways. First of all, the rows are obviously not in order. I'm missing row 2, 3, and 4, but I've got 5, 6, and 7 here. So it's telling me this is actually just a portion of my data. I can also see that my rows here are in blue. So again, it's telling me I'm only seeing a section of my data. I can also see a funnel right here, which is telling me that this is the column that I'm currently doing a filter on. So I can go back, click that again. If I just choose select all, it's going to show me all of my data again. So I'd be able to go back and say, okay, here's my data. So the nice thing about working with data that way is that it really is going to allow you to sort and search for specific types of information. You can even limit things by, like I said, by smallest to largest. So it's a really easy, quick way to take a big set of data and start looking for different options to work with it, finding different pieces of data that you need to locate. You can, again, also do find and select. That will find anything that's in your spreadsheet. So if you have lots and lots of columns and rows, find and select is a really good tool to use as well. But that's basically how a table works. There is a more complicated version of a table called a pivot table. What a pivot table does is that allows you to take really large groups of data and compare multiple different aspects of the data. So to get to that, you would actually go to the Insert tab, and Pivot Table is right here. When you launch the Pivot Table tool, it comes up as a pop-up box, and it lets you select where your data is. And it asks you if you want to have it as a new worksheet or an existing worksheet, and you would say, okay, and it's going to give you a tab down here to work with it on. But the reason why you might want to use a pivot table is when you really have 20 different categories and 50 different columns, and you need to be able to analyze where something came from, where it went to, how many sales were done in a particular region. It would really allow you to go back and sort through that. That's more advanced Excel, so I'm not actually going to show you how to do a pivot table. Our data set is so small here that it would really be an impractical thing to do. But that's where you would find that menu. You would come up here to the Insert tab, and on the ribbon, you would click Pivot Table, and then you would input the data for that. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you how to do real quick is actually how to show your data as a visual representation, and that would involve using a chart. This is also on the Insert tab, and our chart options are right here in the center. I'm going to actually choose a pie chart. And the first, when you click on it, it asks you to pick a layout for it. I'm going to choose a 3D pie chart. As soon as I do that, we see a couple of things are happening on our spreadsheet. First of all, I've got this white box showing up here. This is actually where the chart is going to start to appear. I also now have two different tabs that are showing up on my ribbon and tab. So now I have a Chart Tools tab that has Design and Format on it. These are going to allow me to work with this chart as I create it. So I've got my blank chart. Now I actually need to pick the data that's going to go in this. So to do that, I need to come up to my ribbon and choose Select Data. That's on the Design tab of the Chart Tools. I'm going to click Select Data. That gives me the pop-up menu so that I can start telling Excel which data I want reflected in my chart. So I'm going to click this little arrow right here. This is the input arrow. I'm going to say I'm clicking here, and then I go and I find the data that I want to use, and this allows me to input that. So I'm going to click here, and I am just going to choose my original data set, just the numbers that I entered very first. Right here, I'm not picking the total. You really don't want a total included in a chart because the chart is going to show you the total. So I only want to choose the selections that I originally entered. Once I do that, I come back over to the pop-up menu and I click this arrow that's pointing down now. This means enter, put this into your table, or excuse me, into your chart. So you can already see on my sheet here that this is already starting to take form. And I can see right away that it's showing me what different percentage, what different section of my budget each of those budget items is. Now I can also come back and I could decide to change the title here. I could pick like my budget categories and it would let me do that. For now, I'm just going to say, okay, here's my chart. It's very simple, but I want to show you a few things that you can do really quickly to change your chart so that it looks different. One of the first things is I can click here and change my chart title. So if I wanted it to say budget, I could just type budget in there. But I actually want to change the layout of my chart. And to do that, I'm going to do that up here. Again, this is in the Design tab of the Chart Tools. And I'm going to pick under Quick Layout. Quick Layout changes the way the data is labeled. So if I select this first one, it's actually putting the name of each category right on the chart with the percentage that it is of my budget. If I scroll over this one, it's actually putting the percentage right on the chart and then giving me a legend with each of the different categories. This one is what we had originally, showing us the different sections. This one here is actually putting the actual payment onto the chart so that I can see what each payment is and how that takes up parts of my budget. I'm going to choose that one just because it's a nice visual. And right now, if I were to save this or print this, it's going to have my original data here, and then this chart is going to be smack in the middle of my spreadsheet. But I can move my chart and actually have it appear as a new sheet down here in my workbook. To do that, I'm going to come up here to where it says Move Chart. And it tells me, do I want it to be a new sheet or an object? Right now, it's already set up to be an object in my spreadsheet. I want it to be a new sheet, and I'm going to give it a name. This is my budget for 2021. Once I click OK, now this is its own sheet. If I come over here and I go back to, here's my budget that I was working with, all the information is still there, but now I also have this particular sheet to be able to go back and look at, and it would print out really nicely. You can also go back and do a sort. If I wanted to only see, again, just my car payment, my groceries, and my insurance, I say, okay, I'm only seeing that data here on the screen. Now, if I go back to my budget, it's only showing me that on the chart too. So you can have your chart reflect a sort of data, which is really nice because if you really want to show proportions of only certain types of data, the chart allows you to do that. And you could always go back and you could format the chart as a different style. You could pick a different design so that it would look differently, but it really works nicely. And to get it back to being the entire chart again, you would simply undo your sort, select all again, and it's going to show you all of the data again, and it will show you all of the data back on your chart again. So those are really the basics of getting started with Excel. The biggest thing that you need to do is you need to kind of think a little bit about how you want your data to appear. What are you trying to show? What are you trying to prove? You can always have things in columns or rows. We could always add going left to right here too. If I wanted to add these two items and have a new category here, it's the same thing I did before. I hit Autosum and it's going to give me a new set of data with a whole new set of numbers. And I would just have to give it another name up here. But you can always do that. Excel is a very complicated tool to work with at times. A lot of people get very frustrated with it, and that's okay. It's not always the easiest tool to work with. What I would recommend, if you need more work with this, you need more time working with Excel, and you need more instruction. We do have an Excel formulas class that you can take here at the Warren-Newport Library. If you have a Warren-Newport Library card, we also have access to 2 different tools that you can use for free with your library card. One of them is called Gale Courses. The other is called LinkedIn Learning. Gale Courses offers 6-week instructor-led classes online where you'll actually be taking them from different college professors. And what they do is you sign up with your library card, you get into Gale Courses, and you pick the level of Excel that you want to take. They have introductory Excel, intermediate Excel, and advanced Excel. So if you've used Excel before and you feel like you really need to get into much more complicated tools, you would absolutely want to use the intermediate or the advanced. They also offer different classes based on what year of Excel you have. The things that you're doing are not going to be all that different, but they want what you're seeing on the screen to reflect exactly what you're seeing on your screen at home. So that is in Gale Courses. Again, the classes, there's no charge for them. You can take as many as you want. They generally are 4 hours per week, 2 hours on 2 separate days, and you can take them, they're issued on a specific day, but as long as you complete the class before the next one happens, you can do them at any time. There's also LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn Learning is actually, it was recently called lynda.com, but they were bought out by LinkedIn, and they're now called LinkedIn Learning. And they offer the same type of instruction, but it's in much smaller bites. So instead of it being a 6-week class where you're doing it every Wednesday and Friday for a long time, you're actually able to sit down and pick a video on a topic and watch it during your time frame. The nice thing about it is they will package videos together. So you can take Excel and learn about tables, learn about charts, learn about doing pivot tables, and just keep taking different videos. The other nice thing is it includes all of the exercise files that you need, and it also includes a transcript of the video, and you actually get a little notes section, which is really kind of neat. So you can keep track of the things that were important to you, things that you need to go back and review. And that's LinkedIn Learning. I really advise both of those for you if you feel like you need a lot more hands-on time using Excel, because the more you use Excel, the more sense it will make for you. So I really do encourage you to continue using it, and give yourself a project. Give yourself a reason to sit down and use Excel. Do your own budget. Try to balance your checkbook. Enter the checks, enter who you paid them to, enter the amount of the check. See if you can balance your checkbook using Excel. If you give yourself a task, it'll make a lot more sense to you. But that's the end of our class this evening. I really appreciate your attention, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.